Hello, dear friends. Patrick here again. How you doing today? Today we are covering part 10, chapter 10, called "The Tree of Cousinship" in Richard Dawkins' book, "The Greatest Show on Earth." Thank you so much for watching. You may be the only person watching this video. I do get a lot of visits and a lot of support from people around the world who drop in and say hi, great stuff, or something like that. They'll make a little blurb, but YouTube stats shows me that very few people make it through the video. So if very few people make it through the video, I doubt that anybody will make it through this video series, unless it may be down the road that you're forced to read this. They may make this as required curriculum in the near future. I wouldn't doubt that at all. And they would use this as their Bible in the very near future, when atheism is forced as the state religion. That would not be a surprising thing at all. All the more reason that homeschooling will be very, very important in the future. So this chapter is, but if you are watching it and you do happen to see it, who knows? Maybe this video is just for you, my friend. That maybe God wants you to see a different perspective to protect you from what Dawkins has said. What did he say already? He said he wanted to seduce the mind of the reader. He wanted to seduce the mind of the reader. And how far have we gone so far? We've seen that he says that all creatures came from the sea, but some creatures went back to the sea, and then they came back out again. We've seen that he said that there were in-between fossils of humans found that were 3.5 million years old, or was it 4.1 million years old? We found that he admits that they don't have any fossils in the igneous rock, but isotope dating radioactive isotope dating doesn't work in anything but igneous rock, a lava cooled rock, and all the fossils are found in sedimentary rock. So we've heard that. We've heard him confess that some animals inconsiderately don't evolve at all, or some evolve slower than others. For example, a clam that they find in a fossilized clam of a gazillion years ago, I'm not going to bother trying to remember exact dates, is the same as a clam that they find today. No evolution in a clam. He admits that in the book. See, I'm not trying to go outside sources and try and refute what he's saying. All I'm doing is reviewing his own writing, his own arguments, his own assumptions, and presumptions, and false conclusions, circular reasoning, straw man arguments, and his seductive way of using biobabble to confuse the reader, to present his atheist doctrine, which is the main purpose of the book, is to promote atheism. It's not to be a zoologist, it's not to be a biologist, it's not to be a David Attenborough to display the appreciation of nature. There is a lot of that in here, appreciation of nature, so he's without excuse. But no, that's not the purpose of the book. The purpose of the book is to promote atheism, and at any cost. And he will be deceptive, admittedly so, to accomplish that goal. So let's try and take a tackle at chapter 10. Chapter 10 is 50 pages long. It would take me hours and hours to get through it on video. Even a 10 or 20 minute video wouldn't do it anywhere near just scratching the surface. So I may have to take this offline and make some type of ebook summary of the notes that I've taken. But in any event, I'll try and just briefly go through it and maybe pull out a few points that may be of interest to you. As I said, if you happen to be forced to read this book in your school one day, they may make this as the primary reading material for public school. That wouldn't surprise me one bit. Page 290, he reminds the reader that he says we're just apes, right? He says you're just a naked ape, and he wants to hammer that into people, that there's no God. He keeps repeating that over and over again. So in this one, he's talking a lot about skeletons of different animals, and how skeletons are similar between different mammals and so on. He makes fun of a children's verse on page 293, and he mocks it because it mentions the Lord. He talks about, in a footnote on page 293, evolutionary legerdemain. Legerdemain is French for sleight of hand. And he will never say God's creative mastery, although that is the solution that for the amazing things that you see in nature are a result of God's creative mastery. But no, he calls it evolutionary sleight of hand is what he calls it. So he compares a lot of different skeletons, and he's got all these diagrams to try and seduce the reader, as they say. And he says on page 296, he starts to attack the creationists again. The hierarchical pattern was spotted by creationists in pre-Darwinian times, and they had a non-evolutionary explanation. And he says an embarrassingly far-fetched one. His arguments are embarrassingly far-fetched. Patterns of resemblance, in their view, reflected themes in the mind of the designer. Not a bad idea. He had various ideas on how to make animals. His thoughts ran along a mammal theme, and independently they ran along an insect theme. Within the mammal theme, the designer's ideas were organized this way and that way. I think it's a good idea. He says this is a strong element of special pleading and wishful thinking. That's how he argues with special pleading and wishful thinking. I think it's a good idea that God had different ideas. I also think that because of the fallen state of humanity post-flood, that we have post-Garden of Eden, for that matter, we have a lot of decay in the animal kingdom, mosquitoes and scorpions and nasty creatures. I believe that the prophecy of the lion laying down with the lamb is in future. This decay will not be there anymore. That will be taken away during when Christ returns for his millennium reign. I believe that you won't have mosquitoes bothering you anymore, or bees stinging you. Maybe the bees will only sting fruit or something when that happens. But be that as it may, I have a childlike faith in the mercy and hope of God, and I'm not ashamed or embarrassed to say that I believe that God is wonderful and has promises to redeem the curse that nature is under someday. He talks about Leviticus in the footnote on page 298. He doesn't miss an opportunity to try and bash the Bible at any time. Notice there are never any references to the Quran in this book from start to finish. Zero. I mean, could you imagine if he did that? Fat chance. But of course, it's okay to bash Christians because they're an easy target, right? So let's see what he says here. He says that even bacteria, he says, even quite distantly, think of what he's saying here, page 301, quite distantly related strains of bacteria swap DNA ideas with promiscuous abandon. Borrowing ideas is indeed one of the main ways by which bacteria pick up useful tricks, such as resistance to particular antibiotics. He essentially contradicts himself at this point, because before he said there's no borrowing of ideas in evolution or natural selection, because that would infer a creator. In fact, even prior to that, he says certainly not sufficiently similar to suggest borrowing by a creator. He says, oh no, you can't say that. You can't use the term borrowing because that infers a creator. But he says, oh, it's okay to mention it later in his own preferred context. Again, on page 303, the non-virulent strain borrowed a genetic idea from the virulent strain. Of course, bacteria borrowing genes from other bacteria is a very different matter from a designer borrowing his own ideas from one theme and reusing them in another theme. No, it's not. It's no different. He's just saying, oh no, it's not the same as if God took one idea and used it more than once. But bacteria can do it. They're allowed to do it because I'm not talking about God. But if you're talking about God, no, that doesn't count, right? God can do whatever he wants when it comes to creation. It goes on and on and on. He basically spends a long-winded nonsense to convince himself that God cannot borrow one idea for another. He says, no, God's not allowed to do that. That's no, he can't say that, right? And goes on with all kinds of useless trivia to confuse the reader. And he says the wonderful ways in which the crustacean body is modified in detail. Modified by who? He says on page 308, I would say the only sensible interpretation is that all these crustaceans have inherited the plan of their skeleton from a common ancestor. They've inherited a plan from the mind of God, not from a common ancestor. They have molded the individual components into a rich variety of shapes, but the plan itself remains exactly as inherited from the what? From the ancestor. No, the plan remains exactly as designed by God. The dilly. That's from 208. I hope it's not too confusing where I'm putting in my words. He said the plan of skeleton from a common ancestor, and the plan remains as inherited from the ancestor. I would say it's a plan inherited from God. So I don't want to confuse it there. Dawkins is not saying designed by God. I'm saying it's designed by God. So, he ascribes everything to the efficiency of mutations being, genetic and based on genes and all that. So, again, I'm running out of time, and I don't really want to go on and on. I'm barely even scratching the surface of this chapter because, like I said, 50 pages long. It just doesn't end. This is true. Page 315. This is truly astounding fact, which shows more clearly than anything else that all living creatures are descended from a single ancestor. No, it doesn't. It doesn't say that at all. His paragraph says, just as the vertebrate skeleton is invariant across all vertebrates while the individual bones differ, and just as the crustacean exoskeleton is invariant across all crustaceans while the individual tubes vary, so the DNA code is invariant across all living creatures, which the individual genes themselves carry. DNA code across all living creatures. This is truly an astounding fact, which shows more clearly than anything else that all living creatures are what? I would say are designed by God. He says all living creatures are descended from a single ancestor. That doesn't prove that they're descended from a single ancestor, the fact that they all have DNA. If it proves they're all descended from a single ancestor, it just as well proves that they're all descended from a single creator, that a single creator made them all. That the instructions for life come from a single source. What a duplicitous, devious type of writer this person is. The way that he builds up with data and tries to overwhelm the mind of the reader, and then finally at the last minute he throws in, just like he did in the previous chapter, where he tries to say, well, if there was a creator, then he did it like this, and he tries to do the judo move where he gives a little bit of slack on the gi, and then the person flips him over, but in this case he ends up landing on his head and breaking his neck because he just falls all over himself with his arguments. And then here on page 316, this is actually kind of makes me want to gag. He visits the Large Hadron Collider, and he says, this international endeavor moved me to tears when I visited. It moved him to tears because he's such a humanist and he sees the progress that humans are making. What a insincere pile of crap. The complete deciphering of the human genome is one of those achievements that makes me proud to be a human, he says. I am delighted that this project has been completed, blah, blah, blah. He goes on again. He's a humanist. He's an atheistic humanist, right? And he's so proud to be an atheist and proud to be a humanist, and he gets all these accolades about what a wonderful person he is. Meanwhile, he makes comments that are very often very gross. I'm not going to repeat some of his comments about that skeleton of the child that was found, and never mind. Yeah, he contradicts himself again at the bottom of page 321, saying, of course, the adding up is not quite perfect. He refutes his own previous argument, but I'm not going to spend time on that because it's going to go too long. Talking about borrowing again, borrowing and borrowing. I got a lot of notes in this chapter. about all this family tree stuff. On the creation hypothesis, there is no reason why that shouldn't happen. Page 324. But, and then he goes on to introduce his own argument. I don't have time to go into detail on that, I apologize. It just goes on and on and on. The molecular clock, page evolutionary processes, it suggests that evolutionary rates are highly variable. And he goes on to, in detail in this on page 331, which I think is just total BS. And again, I'm not going to waste too much time on it. I've already spoken enough on this chapter for now. It just, you know, what pseudogenes are useful for is embarrassing creationists. He says pseudogenes, right? Page 332. Pompous, arrogant, and satanic comment that he makes at the bottom of page 332. He's just such a Darwin worshiper. It gets gross after a while. Applies even to genes that are totally vital for survival. I must be clear here. That's the current preparatory statement for every political lie that you're going to hear. I must be clear. Let me be clear. Anyway, biobabble, biobabble, biobabble. It doesn't seem to end. It just goes on and on and on. And he finishes with more biobabble BS. The molecular clock. It's a fantasy of Dawkins' mind. The product of being a pathological liar. And when I say pathological liar, I mean somebody that really doesn't know that they're lying. It's like such a deeply embedded part of their psyche that they identify and they've given themselves over to the lie, if you want to call it that, the grandiose lie that they are something that they are not. This is something that Craig Wright was a victim of, another British colleague from probably the same school as this guy. And so Dawkins has given himself over so completely to the lie that there is no God that he will argue anything, anywhere, at any time, and come to the conclusion that evolution can do marvelous things, genes can do marvelous things, bacteria can do marvelous things, but God, oh no, God doesn't do. God can't borrow one idea from another. No, God can't do that. No, you can't even involve God. No, of course not. You have to make fun of the creationists, and you get the idea, right? It gets kind of repetitive after a while. So that's all I'm going to say about chapter 10. I've reached too much time, but it is a very long, tedious, verbose discussion on all kinds of overlapping topics. It's like 50 pages of gobbledygook. But thank you for watching. As you can tell, I'm getting tired of reviewing this book. I'm reaching my wit's end as well. And so if you've made it this far through the video, you have the patience of Job, and you are a genuine Iron Man. I hope you double speeded it at the very least. So take good care of yourself. Spend time with people you love. Don't forget that God loves you very much, and He wants to lead you into the truth and to protect you from the seduction of lies that are contained within the writings of people like Richard Dawkins and many others, like Dennett, like Harris, like Hitchens. Protect yourself from those lies, and God will protect you if you ask Him to. God bless you. Take good care of yourself. We'll talk to you again soon, okay? Bye for now.